Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Git Good at OpenRCT2. So, you have created a park for a contest and you are ready to submit it. How wonderful. Chances are there are probably many areas where you could still polish up your park a little bit, and in this video I will show you several easy tips to add some extra touches to your park, which should make it look just a little bit more finished, and which should give you more appreciation and possibly a higher score if you are making it for a contest. This video could also maybe serve as a checklist to see if you did not forget anything before hitting that send button. In total, I came up with 22 tips and tricks to polish up your park in the end. Are you ready? Then let's begin with the first tip. Tip number 1. The park name. Something people often forget is to give the park a proper name. So you've created this awesome park with several kick-ass roller coasters and a go-kart track like you've never seen before, all situated in a dreamlike landscape. And then the name of the park is Ducklink and CSO Bench. Well, in my opinion, it's a really good name for a park. It is probably not what the audience wants to see. Give your park a nice and fitting name. Tip number 2. Named employees. One easy little trick to increase the interaction with your audience is to name your employees after them, especially if these people have to give your submission a rating. Want a higher rating from a member of your community named Ducklink? Name an entertainer, drunk Ducklink doing a silly dance, and put them in a funny location on the map. This could also work against you though, depending on how well you execute it. You could also simply name your employees using names that fit the theme of your park. Anything is better than Entertainer 1 or Handyman 1 though. Okay, the following steps mostly concern rides. Tip number 3. Ride names. So you have created an awesome coaster which will leave everyone staring at it with open mouths. What do you call it? Well, obviously you should not call it Rollercoaster 1. You should go through your list of rides and give all of your rides a proper name. If you don't, it will make it look like the park creator was lazy, and it will disrupt the viewer's immersion. Also, giving your rides a name will give you the opportunity to put a nice sign with the ride name on it at the station of the ride. If you cannot think of a name for your rides, just look at the names of rides in real parks, or just copy them from someone else's park. It's not like most rides have very original names anyway. Tip number 4. Track texture names. It always annoys me if someone uses 4 different kinds of ride elements to make a station for their coaster, and then when you mouse over those elements, it says Wooden Roller Coaster 1 or Car Ride 24. Again, just like the ride names, you should also name track texture elements. I usually give them a name prefixed with an underscore, just to separate them from the real rides, which are supposed to be opened. I mostly just give them names like underscore roof, or when I only use them on the map for one ride, I put the ride name in them as well. Not naming your track texture again makes it look like the creator was lazy, and giving them a name may help the viewer actually see what it is that you were trying to build. Tip number 5. Ride colors. At the point when you submit the map, you have probably given your rides nice colors. This is probably a good time to still play a bit with the colors, to see if you can make anything that looks nicer. It is usually best to not stick with the default colors your ride has been given by the game, as they will often look very familiar to players, and they will not let your ride stand out. One thing I sometimes see is that people have given their tracks nice colors, but that the ride vehicles still have their default colors. Always make sure the ride vehicles are also painted in a way that looks good with the ride. Tip number 6. Shop and stalls names. Most people will do their best to come up with names for their rides, but leave their shops and stalls unnamed. I personally think this is a missed opportunity. Where would you rather buy your drinks? At Drink Stall 1 or at Jim Bob's Nuclear Slurpees? Well, I wouldn't really trust the nuclear part, but I think you get the idea. While shop and stall names are easy to miss, they will add a little bit of immersion to your park if you change them. Now, here are some ways to finish up your paths. Tip number 7. Path objects. Do your paths look empty? You could probably add some details to them in the form of path objects. With path objects, I mean benches, litter bins and lamps. While the lamps are not functional in the base game, they still look nice and are a good way to make your paths look more interesting. You should not overdo it with these objects though, just try to add a few in strategic locations. Tip number 8. Fences. If you go to any real park, walk around and count the number of fences you see around you. Parks are covered in fences, usually to keep you out of areas where you are likely to get hit in the face by a roller coaster or a ride that spins around at high velocity. You can also often find fences near cliffs or other areas with a significant height difference. I am not saying you should box in all of your paths, just the areas that would be dangerous for your guests, preferably with a fence which they can see through. Fences can also simply be used to make your paths look more interesting. If you think your fences are too tall, you can simply bury them if you play in OpenRCT2 2. And that brings us to tip number 9. Buried conifer hedges. This is a trick that I really enjoy and which works great next to almost any path, even if there's already a fence next to it. Simply take a conifer hedge and bury it next to the path until only the top of the hedge sticks out of the ground. Now it will look like there's some high grass next to the path, and it will look great in almost any situation. This is an easy trick that will greatly enhance the look of your paths. Tip number 10. Cube paths. While the cube paths from OpenRCT2 2 are easily recognizable as cube paths with their bright colors, in real parks they are usually made of the same material as normal paths, which is most often just tarmac. I have made a tutorial in which I show you how to replace your cube paths with normal paths, which will often look better as well. I have linked the tutorial in the video description. You can also make your cube paths invisible and replace them with any other block or ride type you want, like flying saucer track or dodgem track, or just dirt. The following tips mostly concern theming and scenery. Tip number 11. Stationary vehicles. One of my tutorials covered how to make stationary vehicles in your park. Stationary vehicles can often be used to make your park look more interesting. Made a lake in your park? Put some rowing boats or canoes in it. Made a parking lot? Put some monster trucks or other cars in it. You can even give these vehicles a funny name to enhance the way they fit into the theme. Stationary vehicles are a great way to put something interesting in areas that would otherwise feel a little bit empty. Tip number 12. Replace some shops with scenery objects or ride vehicles. Wait, what? Yes, I said that correctly. Well, you can of course simply add the default shops and stalls onto your map. Sometimes it will just not look nice in the theme you have chosen. One thing you can choose to do in such situations is to make your shops invisible and replace them with scenery objects. Usually a wagon from the Wild West theme or anything that looks like a small house will look good. You can even use ride vehicles like monorails to create makeshift stalls. I made a tutorial on how to do this, which is also linked in the video description. Tip number 13. Quarter tile objects. If you have some empty areas next to your buildings or your paths, you can often spice it up a little bit by just putting some quarter tile objects next to them. A wooden building will often look very nice if you stack some barrels next to it. You could also use lion statues or archery targets in some areas. Try to make every area look interesting. One trick I really like to use is take a pipe piece, a cauldron or a barrel and put a bush on top. This is a great way to make interesting looking plants. Tip number 14. Rooftop scenery. If you have made a building with a flat roof, put some stuff on top. Usually some monorail track or mini suspended coaster track can work quite well to serve as ducts. And you could as well make some chimneys or fans using pipe pieces and cog wheels. This should work really well to make your empty flat roofs look more interesting. Alright, here are some tips to make your landscaping look better. Tip number 15. Painting your tiles. I often see people keep the same tile texture throughout their parks. In my opinion, this is a wasted opportunity. For grassy areas, obviously you'll want to use the grass textures. For forests, however, the grass texture that is mixed with dirt will usually look best. I usually mix it up with some full dirt tiles and some rocks in other locations. Underwater sand often looks very nice. You could even try to make a shadow effect or make water look deeper by using the lighter and darker types of sand strategically. Don't just use one texture, but try to mix it up in your park. Tip number 16. I have made a tutorial on how to make nice looking forests. I have linked it in the description if you want to see it. One thing you should remember when you make forests or patches of trees is that they usually look a lot nicer if you also add bushes under them to make the forest look thicker. This is mostly effective when done near the edge of the forest or the edge of the map. It often looks nicest if you don't see much of the ground under the trees. Also remember to put in some quarter tile trees to make it look less like the trees are placed on a grid. Tip number 17. Underwater plants. Most players don't theme their underwater areas, which is understandable because you normally are not meant to be able to build there. When you disable clearance checks, however, you are free to put plants and other scenery below the water. Especially when the water is a little bit deeper, it can look great if you put some ferns or giant grass on the bottom. The water surface may start disappearing when you do this, however. If this happens, you simply have to move the objects below surface in the object order in Tile Inspector. This may take some time if you have placed many objects, but it can make your underwater areas look terrific when done correctly. I think this is also one of the few ways the water spout can be used in a way that doesn't make you want to claw out your eyes. Now, here's some more general tips. Tip number 18. Test your save file. I have seen several parks where after I opened the park, one or more rides would immediately crash. Before you submit a save file, you should always restart the game and test the save file yourself. Open the save file and just fast forward the game for a bit without any cheats enabled. It's a real shame if your rides, which you worked on for hours, don't get appreciated by viewers because they crash on opening the file. You'd better prevent this from happening. And that also brings us to tip number 19. Make sure your guests don't get stuck anywhere. I have seen many parks where all guests seem to disappear from the park after a while, because they are all stuck near the exit of the same ride, because the creator actually forgot to connect the path to the other paths in the park. Make sure your guests are able to reach every area in your park, and make sure they are able to exit every ride as well. Tip number 20. Make sure the rides you have created are actually opened. It saddens me when someone submits a park and some of the rides which are meant to be ridden by guests are closed or in test mode. You should double check if the rides that are meant to be opened are actually opened. Tip number 21. Repair and renew your rides. In OpenRCT2, go to the cheat menu and repair and renew your rides before you submit the park. This will reset their reliability and make sure the viewer can actually watch the rides in action without them breaking down immediately after they open the park. This is especially important in contests with many entrants, where viewers will only look at each entry for a few minutes. If a ride then is broken down, it means the viewer will just be looking at the stationary ride. This is really easy to prevent, so better just perform this simple action. And that brings us to the final tip number 22. Check for any vandalized objects or dirty paths. Just like the guests in-game, your audience probably also doesn't like destroyed path objects or puddles of vomit. If you press I on your keyboard, you can see all the problematic areas in your park, so you can easily fix them. You can also use several cheats to automatically let the game fix these problems for you. It's a small thing, but it should improve how people view your submitted park. Anyway, that was all for this video. I hope you'll watch this video often before submitting your parks for a contest, as these tips should help you score just a little bit higher. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you again in the next one. See you later.